Patriots Minicamp comes to a close. We break it all down here on Pat's Cast.
Maye's got the fire, Vrabel's got the spark. Offense lighting up like Gillette Park. No more ghosts, no more DC.
Welcome to Pat's Cast. I'm Brad Whitaker. Good to be with you again, back after a brief hiatus, and Patriots have wrapped up mandatory minicamp, and it is hard not to feel optimistic about this team, particularly where we were the last time I shot one of these podcasts, coming off of OTAs where Drake Maye threw 4 interceptions in like his first 8 to 10 throws or something ridiculous like that. Really struggling, seemed like there were some real growing pains in terms of picking up Josh McDaniels' very complex offense. However, these last 2 days of mandatory minicamp have really showed that the Patriots offense is finding their stride in a way that we haven't seen since Josh McDaniels was last in New England. You know, each of these last, 4 seasons now, where they didn't have Josh McDaniels, it was always tough. Hearing about these practices, watching highlights, and the story always coming out, whether it was OTAs, minicamp, training camp, was the defense dominates, but the offense seems to be getting a little bit better. And then even at the end of training camp, well, the offense still has a way to go. But they improved. Well, we have some competitive practices, finally, at One Patriot Place. And it all has to do, in my opinion, with adding Josh McDaniels and the development of Drake Maye. He's picking up things very well, at least so far. It's still very early. A lot's going to happen. The players aren't wearing pads. That certainly helps the defense often at times in the trenches. But even the offensive line is starting to look a little bit better. That's going to be the biggest question mark, just like last season, heading into this season, is that offensive line going to be ready to go? We don't know, but there have been some developments there, and we did get a little bit news out of today. But let's break it all down. Patriots on Monday, their penultimate practice, emphasized a lot of red zone work, nearly an hour of competitive 11-on-11 periods. They pit the top offense against the top defense. Did rotate Drake Maye and Josh Dobbs at times at quarterback. But the offense, night and day difference from what we saw at the beginning of OTAs. And at least from day one, if you're going off of what people saw, it looked like the offense was better than the defense, which is something we haven't said in at least 4 to 5 years now. But they did come back to life a little bit during the final day of mandatory minicamp. Was moved indoors today due to rain, creating cramped conditions without a full, indoor facility. But the defense definitely intensified today with various pressure looks and pass rushes. They played a ton of loud music, and they did that to really try to throw off the offense, and it frankly did. False starts, offsides penalties, but the defense had penalties of their own. Overall, the offense still significantly better than what we saw a few weeks ago. They practice a lot of very important parts of Josh McDaniels' offense. Quick huddle breaks, proper alignment. They're very fluid in motion. You aren't seeing what we saw with Gerard Mayo and Alex Van Pelt's offense, or even Bill O'Brien and certainly Matt Patricia's offense the year before that, where they just can't get on the same page, line up in the right spot, run motion, tons of penalties. Those things are happening to an extent, but it's normal. It's normal in the sense that it was normal for them to make some mistakes from time to time during the 20 years of Tom Brady. They are back to that, where for the most part, the players are lined up in the right spot, and that's huge, right? Especially with all the young receivers that they have there. Of course, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, you're adding Kyle Williams. You have Efton Chisholm, who I really think, I'll talk about him in a minute, has an excellent shot at making the roster. They seem to be picking it up just fine, and you have a real competition now in that wide receivers room, and it really comes down to, are you picking up the offense or not? Because that's going to make or break just how well Drake Maye performs with the few weapons that he does have, although he certainly has more this year. And then the practice concluded today with the players pushing 90-pound sleds across the facility. So Mike Vrabel's still pushing them. I heard Greg Bedard talking about this last night in his podcast. Mike Vrabel cracks the whip right away, right? And the accountability is there, the entitlement, as he said, stripped out of the Patriots culture. And Gerard Mayo kind of was very loose last year at the start of OTAs and minicamp and even the start of training camp. And then he cracked the whip a little bit too late, right? Patriots did, to Gerard Mayo's credit, have a very tough training camp last year. And part of the reason they beat the Bengals is because they were so well conditioned. However, because Mayo had sort of lost locker room early on with that loose, player-friendly culture, not really taking OTAs or minicamp seriously. Belichick really didn't in his final years in New England. That's all gone now. Mike Vrabel totally brought culture and accountability back to one Patriot place, and it's really great to see. Maye, of course, adapting to McDaniels' complex offense. He's talked about taking what's open there, and that's what we've seen so far in these practices is Drake Maye doesn't care who he's throwing the ball to, particularly in OTAs, right? You didn't have Stephon Diggs there out partying out in the boat. In the days that he wasn't there, you didn't have some of the top receivers. You had guys like Efton Chisholm who would get like 20 catches per practice, and that's a big reason why, I think Efton Chisholm is ultimately going to make the team, but Tom Brady's favorite receiver was the open receiver, and that's one of the concerns I have with adding Stephon Diggs, a big personality like that, is I think Brady was actually helped a little bit when Randy Moss left the Patriots and kind of limited him a little bit in terms of spreading around the football because you have this big name receiver that you have to throw the ball to. So far, though, Drake Maye doing an excellent job in terms of spreading the ball around. He's been tested a lot, too. Mike Vrabel incorporating a lot of high-pressure drills, like leading goal line sprints while calling cadences, ensuring his voice is being carried from one sideline to the other, using dummy snap count to catch players from jumping early. That helps his command a little bit. And Drake Maye even said, he's finding his stride here these last few weeks. He's bummed that they're going into this off-season break before training camp starts at the end of July. But you can definitely see an increase in confidence, his decisiveness, his rhythm in minicamp. He's calm, but he's also playing fast at the same time. Delivering tons of precise passes, like I said, sharing the football. He's finding Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas hit with a nice corner pass, Hunter Henry on a crosser. He's avoiding repeated errors, keeping the ball out of harm's way, which was obviously a huge issue at the start of OTAs. And Drake Maye said, you're going to have some bad plays, but how do you bounce back? And he does seem to be stepping into a leadership role. The anecdote that's going around is that he signed Harold Landry's son's jersey and autographed it for him, and that meant a lot to Harold Landry. Is that the sign of a leader? I guess. But, the players seem to really like him. Stephon Diggs it was available to the media today, said he really likes Drake Maye. I guess the question with Maye, which is always tough, especially with a second-year player, is he going to be hard on his guys too, right? Tom Brady, we know he was buddies with all of his players, but once he got on the practice field, he's willing to scream at you, and it's going to take a little bit of time for Drake Maye to become that guy, but from everything we've heard, he is stepping into a real leadership role. Monday's practice, he was 14 of 18 in team drills, started 8 for 8, 3 intermediate to deep passes, 3 red zone touchdowns, 1 to Demario Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, and the other to the new running back that got in the second round out of Ohio State, Travion Henderson, who is everything that we've heard about. Travion Henderson going to be impactful right away. Did have a couple of sacks on an unblocked. He had one on an unblocked blitz from Jabril Peppers on the first day. Had one bad throw and a low throw to Henderson in the flat. But overall, Drake Maye on Monday had a terrific practice. Came back to life a little bit on Tuesday, but still decent numbers. 9 of 14 overall. Threw 1 touchdown pass. Did have 1 interception, but it was a 50-50 ball downfield to Kyle Williams that was ultimately picked off by Christian Gonzalez. Did give up 4 sacks, so there are some issues still there with the offensive line. They did practice a silent count, which is a little bit different. He went 4 for 4 on passes coming from that. 2 of 4 in the end zone. Like I said, 1 touchdown, 1 drop in the red zone by Ramondre Stevenson. The hitch is coming back a little bit, but it's not, at least according to Greg Bedard, not as evident as it was at the beginning of OTAs. This is just something with Drake Maye, right? And when he's trying to learn something, he has to slow it down a little bit, and his mechanics seem to break down a little bit as a result. But as he's continued to learn this offense, his mechanics have improved, and that's exactly what we saw last year. So hopefully this is the only time, in at least in the near future, Drake Maye has a new offensive coordinator, because there's been a new OC in here every single year since Josh McDaniels left. So hopefully some continuity will ultimately prevent that hitch from returning. Josh Dobbs, I will have to say, is looking pretty good as a backup quarterback. He was 9 of 13 on day 1, had a touchdown to Kyle Williams, a 50-yard pass, play of the day on day 1, another to Lan Larison, one of the running backs that was undrafted. Did throw a pick 6 to Isaiah Bolden, of all players, so that's not great. And then he went 9 of 14 today. 3 of 5 and 2 of 3 on the silent counts. 3 of 4 and 1 of 2 in the red zone. No touchdowns or interceptions noted, at least for day 2. Ben Wooldridge, one of the undrafted quarterbacks, is also getting a little bit of time, but most of the snaps, of course, are going to Drake Maye and Josh Dobbs. But overall, Maye's minicamp performances significantly sharper than what he did in OTAs. We know Drake Maye had a lot of hope as a rookie. Turnovers were an issue at the beginning of OTAs, have not been as much of an issue. He did throw one 50-50 ball that was picked off by Christian Gonzalez. But overall, this is super encouraging to see from the offensive side of the football. And I've sugarcoated things before with Drake Maye, and last year with Jacoby Brissett and Alex Van Pelt's offense, and it was a lot of wishful thinking, but we've seen what Josh McDaniels has done in New England before. We've seen what he's done with Mac Jones, who almost won the Rookie of the Year, had a manageable offense, a decent season in hindsight with Cam Newton as the quarterback. They also have a lot of quarterback design run plays, at least from everything I've heard, for Drake Maye, which I think Drake Maye had 2 or 3 QB design run plays this past season. Really great to see. Overall, but let's focus a little bit more on the rest of the team. Some of the studs coming out of the last couple of days of mandatory minicamp. Demario Douglas, 3 of 3 on day 1, a red zone target, outplaying most of the wide receivers. He seems to be the best wide receiver out there, with obviously Stephon Diggs a bit limited. He beat Carlton Davis on a big play today, which also prompted a tackle and Mike Vrabel to ultimately intervene. Isaiah Bolden, as I said, he's being thrown around a little bit, and he had a pick 6 on day 1. Travion Henderson, like I said, he's the real deal. Had a huge blitz pickup today, and that's what we've heard about Travion Henderson, is this guy is an elite pass-blocking running back with a huge burst of speed and can be a 3-down back if you want him to. Ideally, he's not, and he certainly won't be in this offense with Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, but 3rd down guy, that's all you can ask for as a rookie. Some of the duds, not a ton of duds, believe it or not. CJ Dupree, who is one of the undrafted tight ends, he dropped a red zone touchdown on day 1. G. Scott, another undrafted tight end, he had 2 of 3 targets broken up, although I guess he was a little bit better on day 2. And then DeMontre Jacobs, who is the backup right tackle at this point, has had a number of false starts and blown assignments. Hopefully you don't see him. You know, he barely made the Patriots roster last year and then ended up starting a number of games, couldn't make an NFL roster, but ultimately it looks like he is the long-term backup right tackle there. But the offensive line is also interesting with how that is playing out. So we got a little bit of news today that Wes Schweitzer abruptly retired from the team. Now, Wes Schweitzer, many considered to be the lead favorite to be the Patriots' starting left guard. They have a huge competition, as we know, with the left guard spot. You got Cole Strange there. You got Layden Robinson. Sidney So is still hanging around. And Wes Schweitzer was the veteran that you bring in and ideally could win that job. Well, looks like he's been outplayed by Cole Strange, and for that reason, he is abruptly retiring and is no longer going to be factored into that equation on the offensive line. But as I said, the O-line, of course, going to be the big question mark heading into this season. You drafted Will Campbell as your starting left tackle. He's been good. Not great, but he's been good from everything that I've heard. His technique, his fundamentals are excellent. We know the arm length issues. The bigger issue is his shoulder length and his wingspan. But he's going up against Keon White pretty much every day in practice, and for the most part, holding his own. Now, what will that look like when they put on pads? Then we'll have a real assessment of just how Will Campbell looks. But he's a first-round left tackle, and he looks like that, at least so far. So at left guard, as I said, Wes Schweitzer now out of the mix. It looks like Cole Strange is getting most of the reps with that starting unit, and that's what you hope to see. I think Cole Strange is heading into year 4 of his rookie contract. Not going to get that 5th-year extension, but this is a prove-it year for him. You know, he has a good year here. He could get a contract extension in New England. He could become a free agent and sign somewhere else next year. He has a bad year. He may have trouble getting an NFL job for the rest of his career. So a lot on the line for Cole Strange, but good news there that he's doing a fine job at the left guard spot, at least from everything that we've heard, and it looks like he's going to win that job. The center position, kind of a glaring hole right now. So they added Garrett Bradbury, who appears to be the starting center. They brought him in from Minnesota, really had a lot of struggles last year. Jared Wilson, the high IQ center that the Patriots drafted in the middle rounds at a University of Georgia. You really hope that he can work his way into that starting lineup by the time the regular season starts, because as of right now, it looks like Garrett Bradbury is the big hole in that starting O-line. My belief is Jared Wilson is a bit limited with some injury issues. Let me know if you have some more details in the comments below on Wilson, but Bradbury we knew would be the veteran that you throw in there if you absolutely need to. We all talked about Cole Strange potentially being at center, but as of right now, he's at left guard, and Bradbury seems to be the starter there, but you hope Jared Wilson will be able to earn that spot. And then at right guard, Mike Owenu's been a bit limited with a hand injury, so Sidney So has actually been filling in at the right guard spot. Sidney So showed some promise as a rookie, took a big step back last year, but you hope with good coaching with Doug Marrone and the 2 other veterans they have on that offensive line coaching staff that he can make a leap in year 3. And then, of course, you have Morgan Moses at the right tackle spot, who I think had a penalty today, but for the most part, he's done an excellent job. So, overall, day 1 observations, Cole Strange looks to be the left guard. Will Campbell entrenched at the left tackle spot. Garrett Bradbury at center. Mike Owenu, of course, limited with a hand injury, but he'll be your right guard with Sidney So as the backup. And then something interesting, Caden Wallace, remember him? He was supposed to be the starting left tackle last year, even though he was a right tackle in college. They tried to move him over there, wasn't ready to go. So late in the season, he had some injury issues. They played him at right tackle. He was not great, but he was there. Patriots are giving up on him heading into year 2 as a tackle, at least seemingly for now. Caden Wallace played some left guard. So, that's one of those situations where hopefully we're not dealing with that with Will Campbell in a couple of years, but failed tackle, you kick him in, and hopefully he can be a serviceable guard. Caden Wallace, if he can play tackle, he should be able to play guards. Hopefully that works out. Ben Brown, of course, backup center is still in the mix. Did fire a low snap to Wooldridge, the third-string quarterback in an 11-on-11 period. Same offensive line rotation for the most part on day 2. Morgan Moses, DeMontre Jacobs were both called for false starts. And DeMontre Jacobs has been just a total mess for the most part. So as I said, right now he seems to be the backup right tackle. But he may have some trouble ultimately making the team. So Schweitzer's retirement probably amplifies the urgency at left guard a little bit, but I don't think he would have done that if he thought he could win the job over Cole Strange. But hey, this is, again, I think this is going to be a 2-year rebuild for this offensive line. But even if the Patriots hadn't done anything to address the O-line, not bringing in Will Campbell, not bringing in Morgan Moses, not drafting Jared Wilson, it would still be an improvement, I would think, with Doug Marrone, former NFL head coach, very tough coach, being your offensive line guy. And of course, Dante Scarnecchia, I believe, is poking around kind of as a consultant there, especially with his relationship with Josh McDaniels. So McDaniels, Doug Marrone, adding some of the pieces to this offensive line. The goal should be middle tier, right? Somewhere between like 15 and 20 on the PFF rankings. Raise the expectations a little. Maybe somewhere between like 13 and 18. If the Patriots can be somewhere in there, it will make life so much easier for Drake Maye. Now, they're going to scheme around it, and that's something that really bothered me with Alex Van Pelt this past season, is they never schemed around it. And Josh McDaniels is a master at that. So you remember, Patriots in their last Super Bowl victory did not have a very consistent offensive line. And they went up against the LA Chargers in the AFC divisional round. And they basically said, Tom, you're only going to throw the football for half a second at most. You're getting rid of the football, short routes, quick throws. We're going to scheme it up that way. Josh McDaniels can do that. That's what makes him such a great offensive coordinator, is that he's able to hide the weaknesses, which we know the big one is the offensive line. It's going to make life easier for Drake Maye, doing high-pressure drills, getting rid of the football quickly, not being biased in who he throws the ball to. The development of Drake Maye over the last 2 to 3 weeks, hard not to be optimistic at this point in time. Now, I've said that before again, so take this all with a grain of salt, but they have a competitive offense that actually can win the practice against what should be a top 5, at least top 10 NFL defense with all of the additions that the Patriots added. And they're going to have Keon White, Christian Barmore, and Milton Williams on the defensive front. All the linebackers that they added, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Christian Gonzalez back out there, Carlton Davis opposite him, Marcus Jones going to be able to cover the slot receivers. If the offense right now is competitive against those guys, learning all the complexity that Josh McDaniels brings to the table, that is a very good sign for how the Patriots are going to do this year. And don't forget, they have the easiest or the second easiest schedule in the NFL heading into this year. So, again, take it with a grain of salt, but be very optimistic with the way this offense is developing so far. As I said, Stephon Diggs talked to the media. I've managed to avoid talking about this since I took a break for a couple of weeks. I think we all know the story now. It's just Himalayan salts. Stephon Diggs on the boat with an unknown substance, handing it around, saying, don't take it all. I think he was called Mr. Make It Happen or something like that. Not a great look. Anyone that's been to a college party might be familiar with that type of scene. That's exactly what it looked like there. Stephon Diggs did have his first opportunity to address the media today and handled it okay, I guess you could say. Basically said that I don't talk about my personal life. Anything related to my personal life is internal. That said, I have talked to Mike Vrabel about it, and we're going to keep it at that. There were 3 to 4 follow-ups from reporters as expected, and he said, I don't mean to be rude, but as I said, I'm not going to talk about it. So, look, this was not great. Not a good start in terms of Stephon Diggs, and look, we knew the red flags coming in, bringing in a diva receiver like that, but I think the biggest surprise is he hasn't been a distraction in the past really off the field. It's more been, they're not throwing me the football enough, or they're not scheming it up to me. to take advantage of my talents as the number one wide receiver on the team. Now we're getting off the field stuff, and he's dating Cardi B. He's going through all that stuff. I think he's going to be on a pretty short leash. And look, the Patriots, he did sign a very team-friendly deal, right? Had a decent amount of guarantees, but for the most part, most of it had to do with his performance and his availability. We know he's limited right now, recovering from an ACL injury, but you watch him on tape, he looks like he's ready to go. Like, I think you could line him up right now, week 1, and he'd probably be ready to go. I'm really not as concerned about that as I was a couple months ago when the Patriots signed him. I think he's going to be ready. The question is this going to ultimately become a distraction for a team that really can't afford to have distractions right now in a wide receiver room that is super competitive, right? You think, obviously, Demario Douglas has a job. Kyle Williams has a job. Kendrick Bourne, if he's not traded, probably has a job. Jalen Polk, Javon Baker are competing for jobs. You got Stephon Diggs in there, of course. Mac Hollins, they brought him in as a veteran. He's going to have a job. And then I talked about Efton Chisholm, who's just looks to be Julian Edelman 2.0, undrafted free agent. Went to, was it Eastern Washington or one of those schools, the school with the red turf, and he's just lighting it up at OTAs. Was a bit quiet because there were just so many more receivers on the practice field at mandatory minicamp, but he's probably going to make the team. You're not going to stash him on the practice squad because someone's going to pluck him away after all the positive press he's been getting. He looks like young Cooper Kupp out there. And we talked about trading for Cooper Kupp this offseason, and you might get that right away with Efton Chisholm. So you need a real role model in that wide receiver room, and Stephon Diggs not leading by example there with that incident. Hopefully this is it. This is all we hear from it. We know Stephon Diggs is a hard worker. Like, that's never been an issue. Like, he's a very disciplined player. He does what the team asks him to do. He just runs his mouth a little bit when he doesn't get targets. So if that happens this season, I'm not going to be like super concerned if Stephon Diggs runs his mouth. I'm more concerned about some of this off the field stuff. But, I'm sure Mike Vrabel nipped it right away. And hopefully this, like I said, is the last that we're going to hear about it. But it is a concern. And that's, that's what comes with bringing in a true number one wide receiver, right? You have to just take the good with the bad. There's trade-offs with all these guys. We know the Patriots would have preferred a more high-character guy. They were willing to offer Chris Godwin $30 million a year, and he ended up signing in Tampa for about $22 million. Now, you factor in taxes, it's not that much of a difference, but he still turned down a lot of money there. That was choice number one, and they didn't take Stephon Diggs until a couple of weeks after that when all teams had a look. But I think most of the concerns from these teams was his ACL injury. Doesn't seem to be as big of a concern as I think many thought it was. But off the field stuff could be troubling. But we'll ultimately see how it plays out. It's going to be interesting. But that's it for this episode of Pat's Cast. Again, was off for a couple of weeks, but we're going to be uploading a little bit more consistently now. Have some big changes coming to Pat's Cast coming soon in terms of the content we'll provide. So you can look forward to that in the coming weeks. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll see you very soon.
It's a Mayday call, but not distress. Drake's in command and he's passing the test. McDaniels' playbook, a tangled maze, but the rookie QB setting it ablaze. No more flat lines, no more delay. The Zips back in Foxborough thanks to Maye. Reads on point, audibles clean. He's seeing the field like he's 17. Maye's got the fire, Vrabel's got the spark. Offense lighting up like Gillette Park. No more ghosts, no more D's feast. This Patriots team just woke the beast. Culture's tight, the fog has lifted. It's Vrabel time, the tides have shifted. Josh back calling like it's 07. tight and slicing, wide outs revving, pop in motion, dig seems fine. He partied on a boat, but he's now aligned. No more freeloaders, no more crews, Vrabel's laced in